Good morning, everyone. My name is Scott Morris. I am the Business Development Director for GTS Gaming. We're here with another one of our publisher and retailer webinars. I'm very excited about today. Today we have Brotherwise Games. We have Chris O'Neill, who is the owner of Brotherwise, and we're going to talk about two games. One of them is Boss Monster, Rise of the Mini Bosses, and the other is a new game called Call to Adventure. If you're not familiar with Boss Monster, you probably have been living under a rock. It's been extremely popular the last couple of years. Chris and I are good friends personally. My son, Zachary, who is 13 years old, if you were to ask him if he's stuck on an island, what game does he want to have for the rest of his life? It's going to be Boss Monster. He absolutely loves it. So really looking forward to this discussion. Just as a reminder for all of the retailers who are joining us, anyone who is here live in attendance is going to be eligible for a free copy of Boss Monster Rise of the Mini Bosses as a demo version for your store. We're going to talk a little bit about how to get demo versions of Chris's games as well. And then we'll also talk about both how to sell the games and position both the existing and the upcoming pre-order game for Call to Adventure. Also, as a reminder, we're going to run a special between now and next Monday. So today is the 10th of December, 2018, and next Monday is the 17th. If you order Boss Monster Rise of the Mini Bosses or pre-order Call to Adventure, you get 52% off MSRP. So that is a nice way to get a little bit of added value as well. If anyone is new to Zoom or hasn't used the software before, it's very easy. If you hover over your window, there is a little chat bubble at the bottom. You can go ahead and open that up and ask any kind of questions you may have. As I say, pardon the pun, but everything is on the table. Feel free to ask us any questions that you have around the games or about the companies or anything like that. I'll go ahead and moderate the chat window. That way, Chris, you can focus on all of the good and fun information about the games, and I can get all the questions back over to you. But if anyone has any questions, don't feel free to stand on ceremony. Just jump on up and ask the question and let us know, and we'll jump into it as we can jump into it. So with that, I will shut up, and I will let Chris begin the fun. So, Chris, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, and thanks to Scott and Jessica, Barry, everyone at GTS. GTS was one of the very first distributors who took on Boss Monster way back when we were just two brothers doing this on the side. And so anytime GTS approaches us with a chance to collaborate, we jump on board. So thank you so much. And Scott, do just interrupt me if I'm moving too fast and you have a question that needs to be asked.
Sure thing.
So like Scott said, we're going to talk about two games, one in stores now, which is Boss Monster Rise of the Mini Bosses, colloquially known as Boss Monster 3. It's the third big box, quote unquote big box in the game. They're all small boxes, but it is not a mini expansion. It's a standalone expansion, and we're going to talk about that first. And then for the second half of this little bit here, we're going to talk about Call to Adventure, which we're really excited about and is now releasing in late January. We had originally announced a fall 2018 release for that, but had to push it for a variety of reasons. Boss Monster Rise of the Mini Bosses. If you have been living under a rock, Boss Monster is a game where you play the villain at the end of a sort of 16-bit style video game dungeon that you construct with cards. I'm going to presume that everybody here is familiar with Boss Monster, so some of this is going to be a little bit sort of duh to you. You know all this already, I suspect. Boss Monster's done well for a variety of reasons. There's been multiple expansions and accessories, so it's had a little bit of a Munchkin-like growth in the sense that all the various sets are shuffleable together, even though the big ones are standalone. It appeals to new and experienced gamers. We have found new gamers are drawn in by the look and the references and the sort of nostalgic feel. Experienced gamers appreciate it as a appetizer game or sort of a short introductory game for a gaming evening. Obviously, the iconic look has had a big part in its success. We're told by stores that it tends to sell itself. Someone comes in and sees it and says, "What's that?" And the low price point doesn't hurt either. So Boss Monster as a whole has done well since its launch in 2013. And in fact, we were pleased to see in the ICV2 charts It was back on top of the card dice games, at least via the ICV2 surveys, which have some strengths and weaknesses, but it's always fun to see that. So hopefully Rise of the Mini Bosses has already done well for you. Hopefully it's something you were able to get moving in your store. If not, some of the things we talk about today may help with that. So this is Rise and the Mini Bosses. I pulled some quotes off Amazon's page, actually. We do very, very well in the ratings on Amazon. And if you go to Board Game Geek, we tend to be more in the middle of the pack. And I think it speaks a little bit to the gamers that enjoy this game. So Board Game Geek's audiences tends to be a slightly heavier gamer. And Boss Monster tends to be maybe less of a good fit for them. But for newer gamers, for gamer-affiliated folks, so what we call the gamer girlfriends and the gamer boyfriends, Boss Monster is an easy sell. It's just a great way to bring in folks who normally wouldn't come to your store for gaming or wouldn't normally want to sit down for an evening of gaming. Boss Monster seems to be one of the ways to bring those folks in. I'm not going to read those quotes to you. I presume you'll be able to look at the video of this later, or you can read them now. But bottom line, the response to Boss Monster 3 has been really good as the other sets, even though it's different in a variety of ways. So one of the things we wanted to do, Boss Monster's been out, so what, 5 years now, and we thought it's time to shake up the core mechanics a little bit. There's always been a lot of play space in Boss Monster that we've sort of saved for the future. And this was one point where we thought we need to do something a little bit different to keep gamers coming back to this game. Simply releasing a new set of cards in the same mechanic space probably wasn't going to do what we wanted to do. So we introduced two mechanics. The first was coins. So coins in Boss Monster are essentially a mini economy, what we consider a very accessible economy. There's nothing particularly Eurogaming about it. It is some rooms, spells, and abilities produce coins. Other rooms, spells, and abilities are powered up by coins. But it does provide some decision-making that wasn't necessarily there in the game in terms of thinking about how you build, whether you build for a more coin-producing dungeon, thinking about how you're going to use those coins later on. We really liked the decision-making it opened up. And the coins, as we were sort of developing this economy, we thought, you know, what sort of superpower or sort of neat moment in the game could we bring in using these? And that got us to this idea of mini bosses. So now coins are used to hire and promote mini bosses. Here's an example of Draculad. You actually pay a coin to bring him out. And when you first bring him out, he sits under a room and acts almost like a enchantment in Magic. So he permanently enchants that room. And this room will have an extra cleric treasure for the rest of the game. However, it doesn't have to just do that. So because you're sacrificing a room build for that turn, Draculad is going to be the room you build. We wanted them to be able to do more than just a single power because you're essentially giving up a one-card advantage to your opponent. So you're also able to use coins to power up Draculad. So each turn, you can move this card further up his track so that the next turn you could pay a coin and give him the power. Once per turn, you may return a hero in your dungeon to town. And lastly, once he's completely powered up, if you use his third sort of ultra power, then it resets to level 1. So in his case, his ultra power is he can steal a spell or room card from an opponent's hand, which is a pretty powerful effect in a hand card game like Boss Monster. So people have loved these. If anything, the main complaint we've heard about this is why aren't there more mini bosses in the whole game? We do have plans to bring more mini bosses out, but for the moment, we didn't want them to overwhelm the other mechanics of the game. So they're special. On average, you're going to get 1 or 2 mini bosses out per game, and we felt that that was about right in terms of keeping the general feel and flow of Boss Monster the same. So those are the two big mechanics for that we introduced in Rise of the Mini Bosses. As I said, the response has been great at conventions. We've always sold out. The demo tables have always been full. We're hearing good things from store owners, and players are really enjoying it. Now, in terms of pitching Boss Monster and sort of thinking about how you're going to move this game in your store, you guys are the experts at this. So I'm going to throw out some ideas I thought of. But if you have things that have worked in your store, share them in the comment section and Scott can call them out. This is sort of when we're talking with retailers who move a lot of Boss Monster, the first question we always ask is, what are you doing to move a lot of Boss Monster? Because we want to hear what they're doing. So I'm just going to share some of the things we've heard from your colleagues. The first is demo. And I obviously, this is a no-brainer, but I just want to point out that if you email us, and I've got our email right there, we've never said no to a store that asks for a free demo copy. We are big believers that free demo copies are the ammunition that you need to sell the games that we produce. And so if you email me at that email and say, hey, I am at, Board Game Barrister here in Wisconsin, and we want to push more Boss Monster, could we get a free demo copy of this? I'll drop one in the mail to you that day. And furthermore, if you say, hey, we want to run some tournaments, something like that, we will happily give you one of our game night kits. We produced those a year ago or two, but we have a number of them left over that we didn't send out to distributors, and we're always happy to send those out to you. Now, and don't forget, obviously, you'll get the free demo copy of Rise of the Mini Bosses through participating in this program. But if there's other Boss Monster games which you don't have on your demo shelf, or other Brotherwise games like Unearth and the future Call to Adventure that you don't have your demo shelf, let me know and we will fix that for you. So I thought this was very clever. We've heard from a couple stores that they keep a customer list that tracks who bought what. It's obviously, the enrollment is voluntary for customers, but they'll say, hey, get on our contact list. And as part of that contact list, they keep track of who bought what. Then when a new expansion comes out, they send out a targeted email to those folks, which essentially says, hey, the new Boss Monster is out. We noticed you're a Boss Monster player. Let us know if we should reserve a copy for you. That's obviously a chunk of work. It's a chunk of record keeping. You're going to have a number of customers who don't want to opt into a contact list. That's okay. There's no harm in having it for the customers that do. So I thought that was really clever. And the stores that have done it say they almost always end up selling a copy to folks. And they reach out to them at the same time that distributors are reaching out to you to collect pre-orders. So they get a better sense of exactly what they should be ordering and when. So otherwise, I think a lot of the stuff you've probably already seen for Boss Monster. So the boxes do tend to sell themselves. We see them at the point of sale a lot. Sometimes they're actually up on the same shelves of the collectible card games. We think that's a great place to put them just because we've noticed that the collectible players, particularly the Magic players, are often looking for a light, maybe easier break between games. And they are one of the growth audiences for Boss Monster. Otherwise, the stuff emphasizing the ease of play, pointing out your favorite nerd and pop culture references in the cards. Tax Collector there is obviously a visual reference to a couple figures from popular culture. We work very hard to make the game appealing both at an emotional level and at a gameplay level. So just putting the game out, putting your demo copy out, should be go a long way towards moving copies.
Hey, Chris, there was a quick question about the email address that you had on the last slide.
Yep.
Can you give me that and I'll put it in the chat window here real quick?
You bet. bwisegames@gmail.com.
There you go. Okay, I just put that in the chat window so everyone can reference back to that. As Chris had mentioned earlier, though, this is going to be recorded and available on YouTube as well, so we'll make sure it's in there, and we'll make sure to put that in the description of the video, too. That way people can find it really easily.
Yeah, great. Okay, and lastly for this, Boss Monster 3 gives you the opportunity to talk about how things are changing. So if you've seen some Boss Monster fatigue amongst your population in your store, a good direction to take that is to talk about how Boss Monster 3 adds in some new stuff and makes it a fairly new game in that sense. So the mini bosses don't just introduce sort of neat, cool stuff. They really do change some of the basic tactics of the game and how you handle heroes that are coming against your bosses. So that's Boss Monster 3. And I'm going to stop here for a second and just see if there's any questions. Scott, do we have any questions yet?
Nothing that's popped up, but just as a reminder, if anyone is not familiar with the software, if you hover over the video window, there's a little chat bubble. You can pop that up and you can type in any kind of questions you have either right now or along the way as we go. So that is live all the time, and I'm checking that full time. So we do seem to have a little bit of pop in, pop out happening on the attendees list. I'm hoping that everyone's connection is okay or that everything is coming through. We've had a couple of add-ins, jump outs, add-ins, jump outs. So may just be a busy morning, but I just want to, hopefully if there's anyone having any connection issues or anything, feel free to let us know in the chat window, or you can send me an email. My email is smorris@gtsdistribution.com, and hopefully we'll get that squared away for everybody. But no, at the moment, no questions for Boss Monster, but if anything does pop up, I will let you know.
Okay. So the last thing I'll say on that is that we're committed to keeping Boss Monster fresh and new and interesting, so we'll be continuing with releases for that. As the game ages, it's already 5 years old, and even though it's doing well in the charts, it's getting up there. And so that release schedule may slow down a little bit. Up to this point, I think we've done either what we call our big box or a mini expansion every year since the game was launched. We'll probably stick to close to that release schedule for the next bit here, but I think you can also expect to see that stretch out just a little bit as the game ages. So, and of course, if anybody has any suggestions for us in terms of how to keep Boss Monster fresh and how to keep it selling at your store, please let us know. Either email me directly or put that in the chat box there. Okay, I'm going to move on to something that we're very excited about. This is Call to Adventure. This is our essentially our big 2019 release. It's coming out early in 2019, and this game has been a long time in the making, and there's a lot of fun stuff to talk about with this. So we kickstarted this in summer of 2018. It was meant to be sort of a small PR generating Kickstarter. It kind of got out of control and ended up being pretty big. Call to Adventure is inspired by our favorite fantasy novels, and really sort of originated out of this thing we did in childhood. We made tons and tons of Dungeons and Dragons characters, even though we almost never played Dungeons and Dragons. And partly that was because we were young and didn't quite know how to run the games. And partly it was because we could never get enough people together to get a good adventuring party together. But it was also partly because we just loved creating heroes. We would dream up their backstories. We would sort of draw really, really bad illustrations of them. We would do the things which I suspect a lot of you did when you were playing Dungeons and Dragons. And what we realized as we were reflecting back on this was character creation and the sort of dreaming up of who a hero might be was sometimes even more fun than the adventure you then took that hero on. So we call to Adventure a hero building card game. And it was really originated out of this idea of sometimes it's hard to gamify the most interesting part of a hero. Sometimes the most interesting part of a hero isn't the fact that they slayed the dragon. It's what happened to them in their life that led them up to slaying that dragon. So Call to Adventure is our attempt to capture that. And I think we did a pretty decent job. I'm really excited about it. So you as the player compete to create the character with the greatest story. In this case, we codify that with points called destiny points. Destiny points are divided into triumph and tragedy, and I'll show some images of that in a second. And most of these points are gained by facing challenges throughout the game. Some are gained by acquiring traits or gaining allies or defeating adversaries. And one of our big breakthroughs in this was we wanted to do something which felt appropriate to the story. So we got rid of the dice that were originally in the game, and we introduced a rune casting system. Because it's based on fantasy literature, Call to Adventure presents the game in 3 acts, essentially. So you begin the game with an origin, a motivation, and a destiny. And in this case, this is your player board, which has a darkness track over here, which sort of keeps whether you're staying to the light side or the dark side. This character starts as a hunter, and I realize this is not readable at this level, but you'll get the main point. Their motivation is that they're bound by honor, and the origin and the motivation both give you powers and starting abilities in the game. So the hunter actually starts with a point of dexterity, which is the arrow, and a point of wisdom, and they're able to gain experience points simply by doing things that are dexterous or wise. Bound by honor gives them a power which says whenever they overcome a challenge by 1 or less, they gain another experience point. And then their destiny is hidden from the other players. So we don't know this player's destiny, but you have your destiny, and that tells you sort of what your how your game is going to be scored. So your points for the game are determined by your unique destiny. There's 15 unique destinies in the base game, and each of those has a different win condition. Now, as you go through the game, story cards, which are the cards up here in the array, are revealed, and each of them produces either challenges or traits that you can acquire. And we also have these things called hero and anti-hero cards, which allow you to perform feats to enhance your own efforts or hinder others. They're essentially the spells of the game, though they don't always play out like spells. So the challenge system looks a bit like this. Every time you face a challenge, you're given essentially 2 paths you can take. In this case, the challenge is captured. The name's over here on the left. The difficulty of this challenge is 5, and it tells us that strength and constitution runes are able to be spent on this. So, whoops, sorry about that. Now, we're rolling these runes over here, and the runes are coded so that they deliver either 1 success or 2 success, or they give you special abilities like this one. The one with the arrow, the triangles here lets you draw different hero cards. The dark runes, so that black rune you see there with the white moon, those are essentially things you can buy to add in and push your luck. So they give you more successes, but if you roll the moon, then you also go down on the darkness track, and they sort of represent turning to your dark side to get stuff done. So in this case, and I see this is actually a prototype image with these runes here. Sorry about that. They look much better now. I can choose to be pressed into service, in which case I'll gain if I succeed at this, I'll gain a constitution rune, and I'll improve my tragedy score. So, being pressed into service, it's a bad thing that happened to me. I still grow, but maybe I don't grow in as good a ways as I would if I manage to break out of captivity, in which case I get a point of strength, but I also get some triumph scores here. So as you go through the game, you're having to make these decisions each turn. Which way do I want to go? Sometimes that'll be determined by what your destiny is and what you get the most points from. And sometimes it's determined by what you want your hero's story to be. And that's also a lot of fun. So like I said, story-driven game. So here's the hunter. You choose your origin. You gain heroic allies. You pursue your destiny. The whole idea here is that as you play through the game, you're creating a story of what's happening. As you can see, the art is pretty awesome. We went with some of the best concept artists in the business. So we're out here in Los Angeles, so we're able to connect with a lot of folks who do concept arts for the film industry. We wanted to keep the look of this game very loose, very painterly, very much able to sort of insert your own story in here. So there's any number of things which could be happening in this sort of thing here. Is this a blind attack? Is it a diversion? Is she using some sort of magical ability? You know, we wanted to keep it so that you could put in your own ideas of what's happening. We worked very hard to keep both gender representation and sort of ethnicity representation broad in the game. We want everyone to feel like they're able to say, this is my hero built the way I want to build them. And so we worked hard at that. We also tried to keep this setting a little bit sort of a more generic fantasy setting. And we did that for a reason I'll go into in a minute. But Call to Adventure's art sort of feels like it could fit in any variety of fantasy settings. So at the end, as I said, you get to tell your hero's story. So if I look at this one, this hunter was adventurous. That was a trait they acquired as a child. They had lifelong friends, perhaps partners that they adventured with or hunted with. But then something happened. One day they found a place of power. And that led them on a different path. So, and as you go through at the end of the game, once you've created this array of experiences, you're able to tell that story and even introduce we have some optional rules where you can reward points for who tells the best story. So while it is primarily this sort of hero crafting game where you're building an engine of abilities that lets you acquire bigger and better cards, in this case, you can see this person went after Constitution. That's the red shields. They also went after Wisdom. That's the green eye icon. And they did that because at the end of the game, they got 2 points for every Wisdom icon over here. And probably they needed the Constitution to get some of these other cards. So it's a little bit of a engine builder and a tableau builder and a little bit of a storytelling game. And let me get back to that. The ways in which those interact are really flexible depending on who's gaming. So if your audience or if your group that's gaming is really big into storytelling gaming, the game will trend in that direction. If they're big into engine builders and more sort of min-maxing decision making, it can trend in that direction. It's got a lot of flexibility in that sense and is a lot of fun. So here's the really neat thing, the thing that gets me very excited. So while the base game here is sort of a generic fantasy setting, future expansions of the games are set in the worlds of today's top-selling fantasy authors. So for 2019, we have 2 expansions scheduled. The first is going to be Patrick Rothfuss's Name of the Wind expansion. If any of you are familiar with that, it's the story of a sort of a young prodigy as he goes through life and sort of becomes this legend that is, sort of infamous and famous at the same time. Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archives. Sanderson creates these really rich fantasy worlds, which are just ripe for this sort of game where all these different things happen. So Call to Adventure is, in our mind, Brotherwise's attempt to sort of say, where do we see growth in the gaming industry? And one of the places we see that are in what we call the affiliated markets. So fantasy readers would be one affiliated market. And this is our attempt to go get them and bring them into the game store. So when we did the Kickstarter, the Name of the Wind expansion was one of the games that was available. We did... I think that we brought in really hundreds and hundreds of people who wouldn't necessarily have even looked at a board game sideways, except that it was a board game based in a world that they loved, because he has just rabid fans who are completely into this book. And I highly recommend it if you haven't read he only has the first 2 in the series out so far. So that's what we're doing with Call to Adventure. Again, this is us going after these affiliated audiences, trying to bring them in and trying to get them into the game store so that they'll then try out our other games and therefore the other games that you have to sell. It's a packed box. One of the things we've always tried to do is to give you the most gameplay that you can sell at the lowest price point. You get a lot of stuff in this game. The box is heavy. We've put a lot of love into it. The inserts are designed so that there's a special removable tray to hold the runes that has a locking lid, and you can bring it off and have it on the table with you. So we've gone out of our way to really pour a lot into this. People who buy this are going to feel like they're getting a lot for $40. It's going to feel like a good sell to them, a good buy. Lastly, I just want to talk about the player response to this. So we've demoed it now at Gen Con and at PAX Unplugged just this last week in Philly. If you're at Gen Con, you probably saw that those demo tables for this game were packed the whole time. Likewise at PAX, this is basically what it looked like the whole time we were there. You can see it out on the table, and really, really good response to it so far. We're excited about what the future is for this game. In terms of pitching this and sort of how would you get it in, I find that sort of taglines are helpful for folks. So we say this is kind of like Splendor with adventure. It's a relatively simple engine builder. It's accessible. Even a non-gamer can pick it up in a few minutes. And because it's an engine builder, engine builders for new players, they can sort of let the engine build itself and just sort of play what's available. More experienced players can get into sort of min-maxing and looking at the odds of what's available. As with other Brotherwise titles, we encourage you to present this somewhere centrally. The art and look helps sell this game, and the art in this game is just gorgeous. And then lastly, whereas, we might tell you to look to your Magic players in terms of a growth audience for Boss Monster, for Call to Adventure, we'd encourage you to look to your role-playing gamers. So if you don't have time to sit down and do a 5-hour campaign, you might still have time to do a half-hour to 45-minute game of Call to Adventure where you build your hero and watch them go on their adventure through that story. And we've actually had a number of people who are demoing the game at both PAX and at Gen Con said, I can totally see using the characters I generate here and the stories I generate here to inform my role playing that I do with my group. And so that's sort of a neat overlap there. We often find at the game stores that we go to, they have a role-playing game night. Those folks come in, they spend a lot of time at the tables, they have a great time, they purchase the role-playing merchandise that's there, but maybe have a harder time getting them to pick up board games because they're so heavily invested in role-playing. But this is one way to push board gaming into that group a little bit more. So that's all I have in terms of stuff specifically to talk about. I'd be happy to take any questions, and also happy to take any suggestions or comments you might have.
Sure. Yeah. As a reminder, you can hover over the video window. There's a little chat bubble that will open up, and we can answer any kind of questions anybody has. One thing I want to point out, actually two things I want to point out. First thing was I had a chance to first demo Call to Adventure at Origins earlier this year, before it was really kind of being pushed or driven or anything like that. And the thing that I told Chris, which amazed me, was that the runes are just two-sided. And it's like rolling a D2. And in your brain, as a gamer, you're like, well, this is a 50-50 chance, right? There's not that much luck involved with this. But as you start to get more runes and you start to add more options to your character, it was amazing me how difficult some of the choices were, and how, to your point of wanting to go after things that may be min-maxing versus going after things of how you want to drive your character. I became very attached to my character in the game that we played, and I became like, hey, I want him to succeed doing this, right? So if I need to do that, I got to get these runes, but then I still have to roll what I want to get on those runes. There was just really good decisions for something that pretty much you're just almost like flipping a coin. Like that was my brain and mentality was, well, you're flipping a coin. It's 50-50, but the options and the decisions were so good and so much fun that was easily one of the best experiences of Origins for me, was getting to play that.
It's a rich game in the sense that there's so many paths you can take. I mean, if you look at there's over 30 of these story cards in each of the acts. Each of them, or all the challenges at least, have two paths you can take. The sort of bifurcation tree is pretty high in this one. But yeah, the runes are just satisfying. I mean, when you're just rolling those runes, casting them out on the table, it just feels good. I suspect after this, we'll start to see more games starting to use runes as a both a story mechanic and a
trendsetter
and a randomizer.
The other thing, and I think this is really good to point, is your comment about leaning on the role playing gamers and having people who see Call to Adventure and then also look at role playing game products as well. Role playing games have been really on the rise in the last year, and there's been a real resurgence in that, which has been really nice to see. So that kind of fits timing wise really well. I know I've talked to a lot of retailers who have told me that their role-playing game as a section and in terms of purchasing has been increasing over the last year or so, but their events have been increasing as well. So I'm sure that they have people coming in, doing, live role-playing nights or things like that together, or just kind of randomly getting groups together. This is a great opportunity to then transition those role-playing gamers into board games as well with a pretty easily kind of shifted product.
Agreed. Our RPG night continues to be the most attended night at our local store. I mean, every week it is packed. Board game night does okay. RPG night does amazingly, and it's really fun to see. But it's also this really ripe audience. There must be 40 people in the room, on those nights, and those are folks we can be getting to do more board gaming.
Sure. Ashton had a question, standard sleeve size. So what size cards are they and what size sleeves fit them?
Great question. So these are the tarot cards. So originally this was all standard poker. And then we thought, man, this art is so good. It's a shame to cover it up with all this iconography. Let's make these tarot size cards so they're bigger. So the poker cards are standard, 43 by 63 by 88 millimeters, I'm trying to remember. And the tarot cards are 70 by 120 millimeter.
And dumb additional question to that one, but do sleeves cards fit inside the insert? I know you mentioned that you had
So thus the production problems. So the original insert that they sent us was great, but did not fit sleeved cards. And so we're real sticklers for that. It drives us crazy. So we sent it back, and we have just had a devil of a time finding the space in the box because there's a lot of stuff in that box now. But yeah, we think we've now got it sized to hold lots of sleeve cards, maybe even with one or two of the expansions that'll be coming out to all go in the base game box. Maybe not. The sleeves can tend to stack up, so it gets harder depth-wise.
So what I'm hearing is about a year from now, we're going to have another webinar with Brotherwise where we're going to be talking about the Call to Adventure big box.
The big box. Probably not, but we'll be talking about the various expansions maybe.
So, well, that's a good thing, right? Expansions are always good. As you've seen with Boss Monster, that's helped keep the game fresh and new. And quite frankly, this is something I wanted to bring up. You were mentioning about Boss Monster being 5 years old. There's not many games that I could probably count them on one hand that are 5 years old that a retailer today would tell me I sell tons of it. It's extremely, extremely rare. It's such a shiny ball industry, right? There's 60 to 65 new games released every week, and people are constantly, jumping from the new hot thing to the new hot thing. To have that kind of sustainability in the marketplace, in such a fractured marketplace, is really important, I think. So that's something really good to see, and definitely good for the retailers who may not have carried Boss Monster in the past to know about, right? So that's
well,
good.
And we obviously as a company are super, super grateful to all you retailers who do sell Boss Monster for us. Can't tell you how much that means to us. Jed earlier asked about the game night kits. Jed, the game night kits were they're basically a pack of 8 learn to play player mats for Boss Monster, 8 promo cards, and then a paper crown, which is kind of a pixelated crown, which the winner of a game night can wear. And they were and you asked sort of what's our philosophy on OP. They were originally intended to sort of drive some organized play for Boss Monster. Our experience with it was that stores were using them more as sort of prizing and more casual stuff. Boss Monster, I think, is a casual enough game that organized play is totally doable. And if you contact us and say, hey, I want to do a Boss Monster event at my store, do you have any prizing or anything you can send me? We'll send you prizing. But the game night kits are just a nice, easy way to say, hey, we're going to be demoing Boss Monster. Come and learn it. You'll walk away with a promo card. Super easy thing.
And then earlier, Derek asked a question, just to make sure everyone knows that we did answer it on chat. Derek asked a question about normally retailers will get a follow-up email from GTS, and they wanted to know if that could include the link to the webinar. Jessica and I will work on that afterwards. Normally it takes until maybe about mid to late afternoon to get the video edited and uploaded to YouTube. So we'll make sure to talk about that and make sure that when we send out those emails, that it'll have the link as a follow-up. And also have information about the offer for the week. So just as a reminder for everyone, so that everyone's on the same page. So Boss Monster, Rise of the Mini Bosses, it's a full mouthful. That is available right now. You can order that through GTS. Call to Adventure is available for pre-order right now, releasing very soon. If you order or pre-order either game between now and next Monday, you'll get 52% off MSRP, which is a nice little added value. Does not matter if you are here live or if you're watching this recorded. So if this is Wednesday or Thursday of this week between December 10th and December 17th, 2018, you see this video and you go, wow, that Chris O'Neill guy is rather dashing and I need to buy his games, then you can get in on the opportunity to get
great
a
haircut
price on it. So, and then again, of course, everyone who is here live will be able to be eligible to get a free copy of Rise of the Mini Bosses as well. So we'll make sure also to have the email that you'd put in the presentation, Chris, available for everyone so that they know how to reach out and get a hold of you if they have any additional questions, either about getting any of those kits. GTS does carry those game night kits as well, too. So if you need to add those to any of your orders, let us know. We still have a couple of those on hand. But Chris, I can tell you from personal experience to retailers, Chris has been extremely engaged. He's very active in the community, and he is extremely quick on being able to reply and get a hold of retailers, which is, I think, one of the many reasons that Brotherwise has been so successful over the last few years. So it's been very good to see.
Yeah, we are a fellow small business. So we're Brotherwise. It's maybe hard to believe is just 1.5 people essentially right now. So we're looking to be growing soon, but we know what it's like to run a small business. And again, we really appreciate everything retailers do for us and our distribution partners. And GTS has been one of the best.
Awesome. Well, it looks like the questions have slowed down, so I think we can go ahead and call it there. Again, just so everyone knows, we will go ahead and have the recording put up later this afternoon. We'll have that available to everybody. But in the short term, retailers, thank you so much. We really do appreciate everyone taking the time to come and join these and learn about the awesome games that you can get from GTS and from our publishing partners. We know it's always a challenge to find free time to jump online between all of the craziness of being a retailer, especially at this time of year with the holidays and so many different things going on. So we really do appreciate it. Also want to give a quick shout out to several people. There's been a couple of retailers who've reached out that have given us some really good feedback around the webinars, and I really appreciate that. If you do have any questions, you can reach out to me directly. My email is smorris@gtsdistribution.com. Again, we'll make sure to have all the contact information for myself and for Chris if you have any questions about Brotherwise that you'd like to ask that maybe didn't get asked on this webinar here. But Chris, also, thank you very much. Appreciate you taking the time. 2 really great games, things that are, one of them is in my personal collection, more copies of it than I probably should own, but I have a lot of Boss Monster around the house all the time and definitely looking forward to Call to Adventure. So appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Thank you so much.
All right, everyone have a great week. Thank you so much, everyone.